Hello, everybody. Welcome to Strategy and Future. My name is Jacek Bartosiak, and with me is Nicholas Myers. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Jacek.
We will, as the Zapad exercises, the exercises formal part is just about to begin. We will be talking about the Zapad exercises and the sort of the big picture, what it means. I'm speaking from Warsaw, Poland, like 200 kilometers from the most westernmost stretches of Zapad exercises. Nicholas Myers is based in Europe, but much further west. But we hope we will manage to introduce to you the subject. We will try to make you aware what it means. And one more thing, this will be the first of the series covering the Zapad exercises 2021. So let's get started, I think.
Yes, let's get straight into some of the details we already know here. So we're talking today on the 10th of September. So this is the first full official day of the exercise. Jacek and I are going to try to do an update each day with some of the more tactical details. But for right now, I want to talk about a couple of the trends we've seen in the Zapad exercise in the past couple of years, and just what is the Zapad exercise? What should we, on basis, expect is going to happen in this iteration in 2021? So the exercise is basically the capstone for a lot of the training that is going on inside of the Russian armed forces. The Russian armed forces have two training periods of the year, the summer and the winter ones. And we're starting to get to the high point of the summer one. And what happens at the beginning of them is they have to train all of these new conscripts to get them integrated into units, make sure the units have cohesion with the officers. And the exercises get progressively more complex as the months go on. And then when we get to September, which is the midpoint of the summer period, then we start to get into the larger scale general staff run exercises, where higher ranking officers get a chance to use the units that have been trained and apply some measure of operational art skills in deploying the military science that has been trained to the lower level echelon forces to this point. And this goes in a rotation. There are four major exercises that the Russians do in year-by-year sequential. So they started with Kavkaz, which is last year. Then Zapad is the second one. And then we have Vostok to look forward to next year. And then finally Center. And each one focuses on one of the four older Russian military districts that have been around since 2010. So Kavkaz for the south, Zapad for the west, Vostok for the east, and Center for the central military district. There's talk about starting a new Sever, a new northern one for the northern military district now that it's formally there, but it hasn't formally been established yet. Zapad used to incorporate a couple of Arctic components as well. Now they happen more or less simultaneously, but we haven't seen anything so far this year. So that is its role within the Russian military training world. The advantage of doing it in this way is that the Russian general staff can practice some of the real world strategic political conditions that are going to be occurring in each of these directions when they are practicing how to do this sort of operational art in a theater. Now, obviously, in the Western scenario, Russia does not have too many friends left in Europe. Pretty much Belarus is the only one. So Zapad's always been an international exercise between Russia and Belarus. I believe even back 1999, but I had to go back and check that. The current series began in 2008 with Kavkaz. So Zapad 2009, then 13, then 17, then 21 are the ones that I've looked at. I haven't looked at 2009 as closely. So I'm mostly going to contextualize this against 13 and 21. I'll start by showing a quick map of where the exercise is. So this is Google Earth this time. I don't typically use it, but it's easier for me to plot where everything happens to be. In Zapad 2021, according to the Russian MOD, is going to take place at the following polygons here. I color them by the Russian or Belarusian map based on location. And then this giant logo here, which is the Zapad 2021 logo, is they're the two major polygons so far, where there has been international activity already documented. This is Oblast Lesnovsky in Western Belarus and Molino in near Nizhny Novgorod, farther back in Russia. But you can see it's a pretty wide distribution of places. Some of these polygons are very much specialized to a particular tactic. So for example, Domanovsky here is a helicopter range. This area up here is Stuga Krasnya. This is a VW paratrooper range. So it's not like these are all going to be equally sized locations of the exercise. This is just where it is distributed. If we compare it to 2017, you see that it's a lot more spread out this time. I think that's one of the major stories that we need to consider looking at the difference between 2017 and 2021. 2017 it featured these three areas, these two in particular areas as being the principal focus of the exercise just around Minsk. And this one was a separate helicopter range where the Russians and the Belarusians participated. But infamously, no Belarusians went to Russia, and the number of Russian forces in Belarus was curtailed from earlier estimates. If we go back to 2013, the exercise was much, much more forward-focused, but with a large contingent back in Molino again. A bit further spread out, but very, very much concentrated on Poland. 2017 was more overtly focused towards the Baltic states. We know this because Belarus is divided into two operational commands, Western Strategic Direction and the Northwestern Strategic Direction. And usually one of them takes precedence in a Zapad exercise. So in 2013, it was the Western Operational Command, i.e. facing Poland. And this, in 2017, it was Northwestern Operational Command, so facing the Baltic states. And this year, it appears to be Western Operational Command again, though it's been a bit less overt. The Northwest Operational Command's forces have been deployed to Molino out in Russia, or at least the 19th Guards Mechanized Brigade has from Belarus, which suggests that, number one, there's Belarusians going to Russia, which is different from 2017, but also that the focus is going to be much more on the Western Operational Command for the literal defense of Belarus itself. The other curious
Nick, if I may ask you the question,
yes.
What does that mean? What is the the reasoning behind this decision and shifting into this new format? Is it like in cycles, or do you think that the decision was based on some particular reasoning?
It's an excellent question. I don't know the precise answer, but I can say that it appears to be that this is a cycle. So there's a complementary exercise called Soyuza, Union Shield in English, that occurs every 4 years as well, but in the second off year, the same year it's sent, so 2019, 2015, 2011. And in those exercises, they also put one command in charge. And the Northwest Strategic Direction controlled everything from 2015 plus Zapad 2017 and 2019. And it appears that we're just switching back after the Western Operational Command controlled everything before that up to Zapad 2013. So it might just be its turn back. But I think the larger trend here is pointing towards the fact that the Russians seem to have accomplished the main training that they wanted to do for a Baltic scenario that they were wanting to experiment in a large-scale war game before. And I say that because we know by looking at the broad trends of all of the capstone exercises that the general staff has a standard dialectic of what they're trying to practice in these exercises. And I think we see a new trend that started to a small extent with Vostok 2018, when we moved away from, when the Russians started to move away from the absorb attack somewhere, counterstrike in a particular way, and moved much further towards large-scale crisis management across a huge space with very low force to space ratio. And then in Center 2019, that became much more extreme. And in Kavkaz 2020, it was quite interesting indeed, just how much the forces were spread out, despite it being supposedly a more classical war situation. This appears to be what's going on in Zapad 2021. This wide distribution of forces across this large area is actually intended to represent a pretty diffuse war situation in which the forces are not going to be able to mutually support each other because the scenario is quite spread out. Now, I haven't been able to read through everything just yet, but that appears to be how the propaganda is lining itself up for this time around. Though that said, the standard scenario that they are running with is a very classical sounding one for a large-scale Russian strategic operational exercise, which is that they have it in two phases. A first phase in which there is an attack by the big bad West that's coming in to try to destroy the Union state. That's the technical union of Russia and Belarus. And then in phase two, after having absorbed this defensively, the Union state goes on to a counteroffensive and fights back. There are a lot of reasons why I think that especially Zapad 2017 and Union Shield 2019 were more complicated than that. But I do think that we are going to see something quite different from the 2017 and 2019 scenario this time around, albeit not necessarily with the same weaknesses that the Russians are practicing against. Perhaps the most interesting weakness that specifically comes in Zapad, I have found, is that the Russians put an enormous amount of energy into doing psychological verification of forces because of a concern that was pretty widely reported in 2013. Russian soldiers were simply not motivated enough to carry on a war in Europe because there was some perception that this was going to invariably escalate in a war with NATO and cause potentially calamitous situation for international politics. And as a result, the Russians have really put in a lot of effort to ensure that this sort of what they're calling a psychological weakness in the soldiers is not going to be repeated. And so we get all these crazy stories about how they brought in movie theaters and pop stars from across Russia to keep the troops all motivated to go. And what I find so curious about it is that this, well, it does happen in the other major exercises. It happens on a very small scale, whereas in Zapad, it happens like every day. We get a new celebrity who shows up in Belarus and is like, I'm going to sing for the troops. You've never heard of them before that day because they just happen to be some pro-Kremlin guy who just has a decent voice. So that's one thing that we need to watch for in this particular exercise. The next thing we've seen is that similarly to Zapad 2017, because of the Vienna document limiting the total number of forces that need to be there before you are forced to allow more or less unlimited numbers of observers from other signatories to the document at 13,000 troops, the Russians have spaced out the exercise again into many different components, some of which have already occurred. In particular, the engineering and logistics components occurred over the course of the summer in both Belarus and in Russia. And the Russians this year are not being coy about the fact that they claim there's 200,000 troops involved in this in some way, shape, or form, but only just under the magic 13,000 number inside of Belarus itself during the literal next couple of days. And I have a funny feeling that that 13,000 number in Belarus is probably about correct. They're not sending too many forces into Belarus, but honestly, it's going to be almost impossible to verify that it's exactly 12,950 or whatever the official number it is. It's just, again, one of those things that we need to be aware that Zapad is not taking place all at one time. It's going to be quite spaced out indeed. To that effect, already this year, there have been 9 exercises between Russia and Belarus, including one that just finished, I think, yesterday among the paratroopers in Ivanova Oblast in Russia. That was technically not part of Zapad at all. Obviously, they're building up tactical skills that probably will be used in Zapad, but it's one of those things that technically has nothing to do with that exercise. It just doesn't count to the numbers as some sort of administrative tool here. that number, 9 exercises, the same number that Russia and Belarus had before Zapad 2017 over the course of 2017. So it's roughly consistent. What is interesting to note about that number is that it is much, much higher than it was last year, and they only did 3. But remember that before the Lukashenko forged the presidential election results, he was in an anti-Russia mood, trying to bolster his Western credentials in order to bolster his own popularity at home. So that might have been the damper on everything, in addition to coronavirus, obviously. But in 2019, there were 11 total exercises between them, and 2018, 8. But then in 2014 and 2015, only 3 and 5. So it's an inconsistent number. It goes up and down depending on how Russia and Belarus are feeling towards each other. But this year, when Lukashenko's running out of options for how to not deal with the Russians, it's been up again, back to 9, going to be 10 when when you include Zapad into that total number.
Yeah, Nick. So, we have day 1. I can tell you what is happening in Poland. We can see, deployment of Polish troops from the west of the countries to the east, to the polygons close to the Belarusian border, or at least relatively close, in order to sort of monitor the situation and signal commitment and preparations, just in case there are some, monkey around. And, you can see it with your own eyes. Our troops are being, moving by highways and also by trains. So, granularly speaking, what would you expect? What would be the outcomes? What would be the observations from day 1 before we move tomorrow to day 2, and we will talk about it? Speaking of details or some surprises, like a massive Pskov division deployment, for example, right? Would you expect anything like that to happen?
So the thing that would happen if this is going to be anything like the past several Zapad exercises today is that the Russians will stand up an operational group of forces of the Union State, which will be the command structure overlaying the Russian and the Belarus forces. Turn the light on. Suddenly the Scottish sunshine is disappearing from me. So that's what I would expect to happen today without fail. In addition to which, there would be the commencement of more movement of First Guards Tank Air Army soldiers into Belarus itself. Now, what's interesting about that is, I'll stop sharing the screen for a moment so I can pull up my notes here, is that we have seen a number of Russian echelons already enter Belarus overtly for this exercise and not for all the other preceding exercises. So the Belarusians reported Russian echelons arriving on the 23rd of July, the 3rd of August, the 9th of August, and the 24th of August. This has ranged everything from logistics troops to attack helicopters moving across into Belarus by all sorts of means. In Zapad 2017, on the first couple of days, they entrained and moved 2 Russian regiments, or rather, sorry, 1 Russian regiment and then elements of a Russian tank brigade from the First Guards Tank Army into Belarus itself, to the 2 main polygons of Borisov and Osipovichi surrounding Minsk. So I would guess that we're going to see a bit more of that conventional movement occurring now. We also know that the Northern Fleet has moved 200 naval infantry to Kaliningrad. And they've been there now for about a month and a half, doing several exercises, including fleet interoperability, which some of the people who've been watching Russia for a long time remember that this was like the Russian major objective before 2014, before other things became a bigger objective for Russian thinking of doing more fleet interoperability. So the big things I would expect to see over the next couple of days, if this is going to be the same sort of exercise as the preceding ones, is number 1, the movement of forces into the area, probably not on a huge scale. Officially, I think only 2,500 Russians are supposed to move into Belarus, sorry. And I think that they're going to be moving to multiple polygons, not just Obraznovsky, though It is relatively close to Poland, so where you should see just how they move beyond Minsk up to those forward positions.
Yeah.
Secondly, there'll be an emphasis on doing anti-terrorist activity, which is eliminating the enemy's forward deployed fifth columnists and saboteurs inside of the area that's being attacked. And that usually is the dominant narrative for the beginning of the first phase. If we don't see that, then clearly this exercise scenario is different from the ones that have happened most recently.
Nick, would you switch on the maps, because I would have two questions pertaining to particular locations.
Yes. Back.
With the monitoring the perspective and the public debate in Poland, there are three aspects that are most concerning the public in Poland and our security apparatus. First is that two cities of Grodno and Brześć are really close to the border. I mean, I am sitting less than 200 kilometers from Brześć, where there is a polygon with troops exercising. You can see it on the map here on the southern. Yeah, this is it. And in Grodno, that there are elements of air defense S-300, which means that they could cover the area, our air patrolling capabilities over Warsaw, and it's of course debatable how much and so on. There is a major discussion in Poland going on. How would you interpret this, deployment, especially of this S-300 to Grodno? Why are they doing it? And the third aspect that I forgot to mention is that it seems that in Baranowice airfield, there's been a deployment of aircraft, and there are some rumors in Poland that they might stay there forever, so to speak.
So one thing to bear in mind is that the Russians are in fact setting up a new training center near Grodno right now. We need to pull up the details again, but it's part of a deal that Lukashenko and Putin signed in March of 2021. So the Russians are putting at least one permanent facility in. I don't know about an airbase specifically yet, but I would not be horrendously surprised if the Baranowice deployment did become permanent, though I'm not necessarily expecting it either. It's really one of those 50-50, could happen now, could happen later sort of scenarios. Now, according to the literal framing of the exercise, the movement of Russian air defense forward is designed, as you would expect, to try to put up some sort of anti-access area denial over the weekend, what we would call anti-access area denial. The Russians don't use that term on an operational scale, but you would think that if this was actually a large-scale war between Russia and Belarus on one side and Poland and potentially other NATO allies on the other, that they would need a lot more than just a couple of S-300s in order to sustain this, if only because U.S. Air Force operating from further back would be able to take this down with longer-range missiles. With honestly relative ease, it would just take a couple of hours. The interesting point that I found about the recent Zapad series of exercises is that the Russians are operating under the assumption that this is not going to be a full-scale war right away. That what is occurring here is not a conventional attack in the way that they used to be scripted. Up to Zapad 2013, there was a conventional attack that we need to first organize a defense, and then we're going to put in all the forces necessary to do an appropriate counterattack and retake our territory. Even like a Cold War type scenario there. What has transitioned here is that they're anticipating something closer to there are protests or some other subversive activity that is being sponsored by the West in our territory. And as we begin to crack down on these protesters and other illegal elements going on because they're clearly breaking the law according to the Russian and Belarusian scripting, the West might be tempted to use airstrikes against key positions that we have in order to enable the protests to win. And this is a large part based on the Russian theory of how color revolutions are managed in the West. And as a result, they don't need that much forward air defense in order to potentially deter Polish F-16 from lobbing off a couple of missiles in order to send a demonstration that you should not use force against the Belarusian, that the Belarusian police should not use force against the Belarusian people. Now, we can imagine just how wildly escalatory this would be and how unrealistic it would be for the Polish government to make that decision. But this is a large part of how the Russians are understanding the first phase of a modern war in Europe. So on the one hand, yes, the S-300 forward is somewhat concerning in as much as it can at very least monitor all things going on in the airspace, especially during major exercise that Poland is doing right now, with having moved the 12th Mechanized Division from the west of the country up to the east, one of the larger exercises in some years, if I remember correctly. But on the other hand, it's not there in order to be a war-winning mechanism. It's really there, according to the scripting anyway, to be a war-deterring mechanism. If they were going to try to win a war, they would need a heck of a lot more than just a couple of S-300s to accomplish this.
Yeah, just a few pieces of my comments, my 2 cents. You know, if you take a look at the map, and Grodno is in a pivotal position, you know, in a grander picture of Baltic states protection and NATO Article 5 commitment fulfillment, you need to protect the right flank of movement. And Grodno is in a pivotal position. You need to secure this area, or at least neutralize it in terms of the, you know, anti-acceleration denial, just to be able to freely maneuver towards Lithuania. This is a major challenge. Any deployments of any Russian troops there, and including especially long-range anti-acceleration denial capabilities that are, you know, deterring our action in order to fulfill the commitment under Article 5, is a major escalation in terms of the strategic signaling. That's why it's very concerning. I want also to share with all of you, I just received the information that all soldiers of the territorial defense in Poland have been right now shifted to the warning mode, and they need, if notified, they need to show up in the units within 6 hours. Which means that our MOD is getting ready for some potential provocations all along the border with Belarusian Republic. So this is what it looked like from the angle here locally, not from far away. Yes, and that concerns 23,000 territorial soldiers on active duty, which is quite a lot. And that's, I think, the first time I remember that this happens.
I think the last point that I would close on there is on that Grodno point specifically. What you point out there is very important, that Grodno is very much sticking out right into anything that Poland can do to assist Lithuania. If I zoom in here on the polygon that they're using, this deserty looking place, because they're churning up quite a lot of dirt whenever they do these regular things, it's very close to the tri-point of Poland, Lithuania, and Belarus. And
very close to Vilnius. You can easily access Vilnius if you are not opposed, of course. Yes. If you just could show it on the map, and which is highly destabilizing for the Vilnius government. And they have already signaled it on many occasions to Poles. Yeah. So.
But this logic cuts both ways. There has been a surprising amount of talk in 2021 in the build-up to Zapad about how Belarus, indeed Grodno itself, is a Russian strategic salient in the West, especially since Ukraine has moved in a very stridently pro-Western angle, so that even if it can't fight with NATO, it's certainly not going to be allowing Russia to pass on its territory anytime soon. As a result, the Russians perceive that in Belarus's strategic usefulness is very much moving to a use it or lose it type scenario if there's going to be a crisis in the near future. And so I think we might see a bit more emphasis on how the Russians are going to do rapid deployments over to Grodno and Brest, probably Grodno especially, in order to ensure that it doesn't get seized early on in a campaign and turned, allowing this area to become a bit larger of a gap or corridor through which Poland and the other NATO allies can resupply Lithuania and subsequently Latvia and Estonia as well.
Yeah.
I think I'll close on that point. Unless you have anything else to add, we'll be.
No, I think it's a good moment to pause or even stop, given the fact that we'll be, continuing with the series, and the following episodes we will report what has happened on day one and so forth. So thank you, Nick. Maybe that would be good for a starter. What do you think?
I hope so.
Okay, thank you very much then. That was us reporting on developments around Zapad exercises 2021. Nicholas Myers and Jacek Bartosiak, Strategy and Future. Stay with us for more episodes. Thanks.